Right. Hi, Carrie and Jen. How are you guys today?
Hello, we're doing well.
Doing
So I'm
great.
so excited to get on this chat with you guys. I know we've talked a couple of times and we were finding that like so much of what we do aligns. And I just really enjoy talking to you guys. So I'm excited to just kind of have like a little casual chat about what we do and how we can help people and where we might overlap a little bit. So Carrie, Jen of the OT Parent Coaches, if you guys want to tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do to start for the audience.
Sure. So Carrie and I um, are occupational therapists by background. We met years ago, a long time ago. Um, wow, I think it's actually almost like 20 years ago. It's a long time ago, working together in the schools. We worked in the same public school district as school-based occupational therapists, and um, and that led us to become the OT parent coaches for a variety of reasons. Most of the short of it is that during COVID, we were both still working in the schools. We had to do remote OT, which was interesting, and but one thing it allowed us to do was really have a lot more frequent um, and in-depth conversations with parents um, and our caregivers. And so we really found that to be valuable, that even though we weren't directly working with the kids, or we were working with the kids in such a different way, that kids did still end up meeting their goals. And we thought, wow, that was pretty cool. And so it really just kind of honed in that impact of being able to empower parents and caregivers with information that works for them, in order to support themselves and support their kids' individual needs. So that's where we kind of wondered about doing some coaching, and then that led to the OT parent coaches.
Yeah, COVID was such a eye-opening time for all of us, and I definitely experienced some of the same things. I am happy to be back, like where we can actually access in person a little bit. But yeah, it was definitely formative for everyone, right?
Exactly.
And
I don't know,
actually,
Carrie, you want to add a little bit
yeah,
about what we do?
I was gonna add actually back to that same conversation first was that um, even you're talking about like the goals, and yes, we would help support them in different ways than we had before, and help the parents or caregivers understand a little bit more about how they could be doing these activities or skill building tasks together, or encourage it at home, and or see the link to it with the activities they were expected to do. So there was that, but then also we were noticing too, like the priorities and the goals like informally kind of were changing, because things were more relevant at that time during that. So there might be a kid who was starting to have like some regulation difficulties, or difficulty participating in the activities that they would have been doing with us in person, because it was remote. So then we would start to shift that conversation to, okay, how are they showing up, and what's the how can we like peel back some layers and talk about why that might be happening, and kind of go at it at a different angle than just like the direct, more of some of the direct activities to address certain goals. So it kind of shifted the conversation to how and what the caregivers and parents were dealing with in terms of their levels of stress and trying to get everything done, and they were just so focused on the kid doing the thing. And it was like, well, let's take a step back and think about like their own self-care and their own regulation. And then so it also kind of started to lead into like just basically a new application of what we knew and brought to the table as OTs. So I think that was part of it as well, that kind of organically started to happen.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that like ties perfectly into kind of like what I do as well, with my like you guys are the parent coaches. I call mine caregiver coaching. Tomato tomato. A similar way though, that like really it's all about trying to empower caregivers to carry out the things that we might do in day-to-day therapy. So for me, I got into, I'm a PT, and I've been a PT for about 10 years now. And most of that time I've been working in schools or with kids with, more moderate to severe level disability. And I knew I wanted to start my own practice. And in kind of like digging into what my niche was going to be with my new practice, I was really seeing these repetitive themes that were, the caregivers weren't able to take what we were all doing in our like little wonderful microcosms of the world and like really apply it and bring it together into the home or look at it more holistically. And I was wondering, like, to what end is my like one-off session once a week going to change what is happening in that child, in that family's life. And then so I started looking more at the coaching model and developing my caregiver coaching program to really help empower caregivers to feel like they have the routines and the tools and resources to really take everything into the home and do it on their own and know where they can find the resources when they need them. So yeah, that's kind of what I do now in a nutshell. But yeah, we were, thanks for sharing what you guys do. And I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more as we talk a little bit about, all the specifics of our conversation today. And we'll leave some time at the end to kind of talk about like how people can work with us if they want to. So yeah, let's just like dive in. So we have had a lot of wonderful conversations and there's so much that I know we could talk about for hours. But the first thing that I was thinking we could talk about today is environment and like, what are some of the ways that you can set up the environment to really help with learning, regulation, things like that, from an OT parent coach perspective?
Yeah, actually, this is an awesome question, and I think some of these questions will help actually kind of define and clarify what we do and how we're able to help from you as well. Same thing. So I feel like because we didn't delve into like exactly how we're helping to support parents, but it can be in any of these domains and categories we're going to talk about. So and it's a lot of different things. It encompass a lot of different areas that children are struggling with or need some support with, and then we're supporting the parents, just to clarify that, and then we'll talk about these questions. We're helping support the parents as they are figuring out how to best support their children in the ways of, as we said, whether it's learning more about their own self, their own self profile, like their skills and their areas of vulnerability or weakness, the ways that they self-regulate or need to learn to do that, and the way they're showing up, the way they're responding, and then what has worked and maybe what they're seeing is points like frustration, pain points, and then how that can be supported when they're trying to help their kid with certain scenarios or certain things that they're going through, whether it's a phase or a stage of development or a particular area of skill or development that is difficult for that child because of who they are and where they are in life. So anyway, that's just to give you a little bit about that.
No, I think that's like a huge point of clarity, because we talked about this too, of like, what is coaching and what does that mean, and how do people know if it's what they need? So I think that's huge. And I think we both look at it in a little bit of a different way, which will come up kind of as we talk through things. But I think that's like a huge point of clarity in that, like, yes, you guys are OTs and I am a PT, but coaching and parent coaching, caregiver coaching is like it's a little bit of a different ball game, a little bit of a different entity. And a lot of people don't even really know what it is. So yeah, I appreciate that clarity there, Carrie. So in that, if someone came to you and they were, or in general, what would you guys say? Is there anything about setting up the environment or a workspace for a child that you think you could share? Little tips and tricks?
Yeah, one of the, first, every, we can definitely give some general strategies that work. One of the benefits of parents coming to us as a coach with the coaching lens is that we're able to kind of draw from our OT lens and then really personalize, individualize really help parents figure out what is the sticking point, what's getting at the setting up a child's workspace to make it more conducive for learning, really looking at what's getting in the way. So, every brain and body is going to be different in terms of what's getting in the way for them being able to learn, to attend, self-regulate. So, it is one of those kind of it depends answers, but we can definitely give some examples of what might be some things that we're recommending. Because what happens with this question is then we're helping parents really determine if they don't already know. A lot of times parents do have a general sense of their child's sensory profile, meaning their preferences, things that are challenging, getting in the way, things that are aversions in terms of their sensory system, and how those are hindering either self-care or daily tasks. But we can really help dig a little bit deeper with that, give them a little bit more information, and then that in turn can help us come up with strategies that are going to work for the child, the family, the household, different context. So yeah, we can definitely. Some of the things that we might recommend is, we consider the child's movement needs, so we can help parents determine do they is sitting helpful, or do they need to stand? Can they sit for little periods while they're doing what they need to do? Maybe they need a little wiggle room. I would say one of my personal favorite go-to recommendations, I find myself always asking parents, oh, do you have a yoga ball somewhere in the house? Like that can be a really quick, easy fix for someone that needs a little wiggle room, and you can use that in various situations as a chair for work or at the dinner table. But basically considering their movement needs, and then considering lighting, visual needs. So do they need things brighter, dimmer? Do they need a little, extra lighting at the desk, a lamp, or not? Does that help, alert their system a little bit more? Or is it too much if you have too much light? So helping them experiment a little bit there. Maybe even something like a slant board. We're putting things on the vertical surface or working at a vertical surface. Even taping something to the fridge can help align things in terms of the oculomotor system and get things kind of at a just right visual positioning. So that can be a little bit of a quick, easy change, or just using like an empty 3-ring binder to kind of prop up things a little bit more. That made things a little, it's kind of better visual hygiene to kind of prop something up. It helps things align a little bit better ocular motor wise. And then considering things like auditory input. Sometimes parents or humans in general are prone to thinking that things need to be quiet in order to focus, but it can actually be the opposite depending on your sensory profile.
Yeah.
I remember, and Carrie's talked about this too with one of her sons. I remember my daughter studying in high school, and she would have the TV on. She'd be listening to music, and I'm like, how can you study? But she was successful in her studies, and that worked for her, and she needed that rhythm and that input in order to sort of get in her attentive groove. So helping parents decide what works for them. And really, again, just considering all of those, the sensory systems. Another one, might be oral motor input, things like, sipping water, chewing gum, crunchy, chewy snacks can help with self-regulation. So, and change one's level of alertness. Asking questions about that and keeping those things handy. Be really just simple, quick things you have around the house, and simple changes that folks can use.
Yeah, and I love what you started out by saying, like, these questions can be super tricky for us because we all love like an individualized support, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I'm saying like, what are some strategies? You're like, well, it depends. And that's so huge for all of what we do. And that's why it can be so important to work with like an individualized, whether it be like therapy or coaching or whatever, instead of, you can't just like Google these things, like
Right.
what is a good sensory support. And a lot of like, it's such a hot button term right now that I feel like people think that they can do that, and I'm sure there are some. I'm not trying to say But I think it's really important that what you say about, it's not something you can answer as a
Right.
just a blanket for everybody.
And a lot of our that's it's a really good point. A lot of the value of our conversations with parents comes from us being able to explain the why of what something did or didn't work, maybe, or ask the questions that help them figure out for them maybe why it has or hasn't helped at this moment or at this time. Because sometimes people will find things online that really were awesome or helpful, and that's great. And other times they'll say like, yeah, we tried this, we tried this, we tried this, and none of it works. And we were like, yeah, because that's not doesn't match with your kid's profile, but they don't know the reason behind that, or it sounds like it would because it's shown as such, but then there's nuance to that child about the way that they take suggestions or new things or anything specific to their personality or their context. So we can help them. We help parents kind of sometimes tease that out of like what why something like the underlying mechanism of what that sensory support is intended to do or has an effect of doing, and then introducing ones that, like you said, that someone may not find or see quickly online. So yeah, I think that's one of the big things is to be able to help them understand and learn that from a reputable source instead of kind of sometimes from like the general
Yeah, and
zeitgeist
I
or
love
public.
that.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of why we all do what we do too, is like um so often in my practice before I became a coach, like I would just be like, okay, do this exercise or, implement this strategy or whatever it might be. And not always explaining the why behind it. And I think that's where that like empowerment and feeling like you can kind of take the reins on these plans kind of like gets lost a little bit. And I think that's like huge to what we all that's why we do what we do now is to teach people the why behind it so that they can really kind of understand and feel like they have a better grasp on everything. So yeah, that's huge. I love that.
And then what about you? I guess on your from your perspective in the work that you're doing, what kind of I guess physical environments and like sort of physical environmental shifts
Mm-hmm.
that you found really can help kids and parents feel more supported? What kind of things
Yeah,
do you?
I
I know
think
it depends.
it does. It depends. For sure does. But like, just to kind of like look a little bit more into like my lens, some of the kiddos and families that I work with have a little bit more mobility challenges, need a little bit of help with that. So I think some of the things that I really like to do is, first of all, make sure that everything is like as safe as can be. And that's not just for the kiddo who's doing the moving, it's for the parent who's helping as well. Because a huge part of what I do is to prevent injury and burnout and like that repetitive physical stress that comes along with being a caregiver. So I think, it can range, right? It depends, but that can be like reducing the physical clutter, making sure that there's no tripping hazards, making sure that surfaces are at the appropriate height so that you're not having to like bend or hunch or anything like that. Um, and obviously, so there's a lot of overlap, right? You guys talked a lot about movement, and a yoga ball was an example thrown out. Those are things that I like to do too, to realize that like what our bodies need and when they need it. So that can be huge. And then also I do dive into equipment needs a lot. So whether that be or supportive seating, standers, gait trainers, how to get around the house, things like that. But yeah, I would say like my first and foremost, like I said, was, safety is first. But I also think when you do streamline those processes, you're taking out a lot of the extra stress, brain power, kind of mental load of a task, and really making sure that it's like a very sustainable routine that doesn't feel overwhelming. So yeah, that's kind of how I handle that. Um, so I'm curious, if you guys had to say like one simple low cost change that a family could make like right now or this week or next week or something, do you have an example of something like that?
Yeah, we have one no cost one that comes to mind
No
is
cost is even better.
yeah, no, one
Oh
no
yeah.
cost, a freebie is having parents consider that there's, when they're supporting their child, there's more sensory channels that you can reach in your child other than the auditory ones. So
Yeah.
typically we're using our voice to give instruction, and that we can actually give a message to a child or give direction or support in other ways, like using the tactile system or the visual system. So things like visual cues or visual schedules or other visual prompts. And so we kind of say you can change the sensory channel, right? If you think of it as the metaphor of a remote, instead of using your voice, using some other type of instruction. And in addition to making things really playful and fun, even using like a silly voice, even if you are using your voice, using a silly voice or a singing voice, to even, you can do that with a teenager to even to help them, pick up their room or things like that. Those can be fun and playful and less threatening to others' nervous systems when that comes in. So, but yeah, changing the sensory channel is a once you kind of train your brain to, for example, a toddler or a younger elementary age child, parents always say like, oh, I told them to put their shoes on 5 times, put on your shoes, and they're not moving, they're not listening, right? And we say, well, maybe experiment and try changing the sensory channel and maybe just pick up their shoes and put them near them or tap their shoes to their feet. And
I just did that the other day with a kid. I took their shoes and I just did them like they were walking
so
for them,
walk
and it was
over,
like it
yeah.
got their attention. They thought it was fun, and it like
Yeah,
they moved on and did the thing because it was really yeah. I use that all the time.
we do it all the time. Yeah,
I feel like
so,
that helps me in my life. First of all, I have
yeah.
an
There you
almost
go.
2-year-old, and I'm like, oh yeah, that is great. Because honestly,
Right.
sometimes when you get home and you're just parenting, you forget about these things that you like do
Yeah, oh
all
my gosh.
day. Because like when I'm in my therapy sessions, my therapy brain is on, and I'm probably
Yeah,
doing a lot of those things, and then. Yeah, but I also
I
love
know.
that you're calling it like changing the sensory channel, and that is like something that I will remember. Like it's the wording of it is really like I love that, top notch.
Yeah, we
Must
didn't
give
coin
credit.
that phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
we
sure.
have
Yeah,
to,
yeah. but
yes,
but it's something that I will remember. Like change the channel
yes,
because it's
it
not
is a helpful
working.
metaphor.
So yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
um,
How about you?
and
Some no or low cost strategies that you find yourself sharing with parents?
I think for me, really just looking into what can you do that is already like in your home. Not going out and like buying therapy equipment right away or feeling like, oh, just because I brought something into your home you have to have the same thing. There's usually a swap that we can do like really easily. Like if we're working on balance, maybe it's standing on a couch cushion or even laying over a couch cushion to work on, strengthening of your arms when you're laying on your belly, things like that. Laundry baskets for movement breaks or like pulling heavy things in a laundry basket. Like I think a lot of my little swaps came from that COVID time where I realized I had to figure out what people could
Yeah,
easily
yeah.
have in the home, and we also weren't going out shopping. So really figuring that out. So I guess those are my quick little tips and tricks for that.
Love that.
Um, I think a lot of what we talked about kind of plays into like this conversation we've had before about um, coaching and the model of coaching and how it might play into people who are doing homeschooling and how that could benefit them. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that and like what you might have experiencing or what you might think that there could be um, problems or things that people might need support with when they're homeschooling and how you guys might be able to help with that?
Mm. Yeah, I could start with that. I think one of the big, I guess, challenges, whether it's homeschooling or just working or playing with a child at home in the times you have with them at home, even if it's like supplementary or complementary to schooling outside the home. There are a lot of times that families get really frustrated because they're basically wearing a new hat, right, of not just a caregiver, but like a teacher or a instructor, or trying to connect with them on a learning level that they haven't done before, at different ages. I mean, they might have done it in the early ages. But one of the things can be really tricky, I think, that people have talked to us about is like they see things happening, like symptoms of an underlying issue, but things that are happening on the surface, sort of they surface level kind of behaviors, things that maybe, refusing to do certain activities, or tearing things up, or pushing things away, yelling, crying, even like, I mean, just throwing things, or even just starting to disengage, like disengagement with being careless or silly, or starting to just like not do it with their full true effort. And parents sometimes struggle with like what to do with them. They sort of do like just traditional, maybe like behavior management techniques that they're trying to kind of get them to do the thing. That's a big thing, is getting them to do this work. They have the pressure on themselves to like get them to do these activities. And so, I mean, that's one of the main, I guess, sets of challenges that parents often talk about with us, whether it's schooling related or doing other activities at home, or routines, like daily routines, for example, even that they need to do, like getting ready for bed, or, a after school routine, again, even if they're coming home from another school setting. So we're often working with parents on helping them, again, recognize that that's a surface level, like tip of the iceberg issue, that there's things underlying that are probably leading into why that's happening. So to help them chase the why there, and then also like to kind of help them understand the, I know I'm kind of jumping ahead to it, but like kind of addressing those issues in how parents can support their child, like in like meeting them where they are in that moment or in their phase of development, and like helping them support them in like with like a sort of the just right way, like meeting them where they are, and learning how to kind of balance that out with like enough of a challenge that they can achieve and get to the next thing, but also not too much where they're not able to kind of access it. Anyway, so that's I think a big part of this, whether it's homeschooling or additional, interaction with their kid outside of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. No, I think it's huge because I think that, traditionally in a school, there are supports from an occupational therapist in the school, or, you might have seen them work with a certain kid. You're picking up on those little tidbits of knowledge as a teacher. But then when you are a homeschool like teacher, then you're the parent and the teacher, and you're really learning these things for the first time. So I think that like having, someone like you guys in their back pocket, to really learn about all of those things. I think one of the like things you guys have talked about a lot is like sensory supports and sensory profiles, and realizing like what your kid needs and the why behind it. It can be huge, because you don't know what you don't know, right? You're just seeing, exactly, like you said, you're seeing the symptoms on the surface, and you might not know the why behind it. It can be very frustrating.
Right. Right, and in like that learning situation too, that like a lot of times, again, parents might have been used to thinking about that when they were kids, were like infants and toddlers, wondering, because they can't get the answers from their kids. But once kids potentially start to be able to express that in ways that the parents understand more, it becomes something where you lose some of that instinct to sort of dig deeper and to like put on a different detective hat or like lens to try to figure out what might be going on, so that you can approach it in a way that actually helps the underlying issue. And I think what you said, we had a conversation with someone who, in the homeschooling space as well, months back, and we were talking about that, how to support their sensory needs and profile, just what you were mentioning. So like, and Jen already kind of talked about one of those examples when we were talking about like setting up the home environment to encourage learning and engagement. That was the conversation. We talked a lot about how they can kind of look through in a sort of more systematic way, like about a child's sensory profile and needs, and how it interacts with the parent or caregiver's style or sensory needs, because a lot of times parents are saying like, in the afternoon I need it to be this type of way for my own like regulation, and my child is literally seeking out the opposite. And so how do we negotiate that, frame, how do we negotiate that sort of field that we're playing in? So
I think
Yeah,
what
that's
about you?
making sure everybody's sensory profiles are being validated is often tricky for families. Yeah, because they
absolutely.
might know what their kids need, but then they're like, well, when my kid's blaring the radio while they're studying, that's really dysregulating for me. When I'm doing, working from home or doing whatever
Yeah.
they do, or just in general at that time of day, it's dysregulating. So trying to help them navigate that as well.
And realizing that, as a caregiver, as a parent, your needs need to be met as well, or to the
Yeah.
that, like you said, there's a balance, but not letting
Well,
that fall to the bottom of the barrel all the time. That's like a huge part of my program, is really talking about how if you are not fulfilled, if your cup is not full, you can't pour from it, right? So really making sure that we address that as well.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how about you? I was going to ask, I mean, that's getting at some of it too, but I was going to ask you, like, how does that, how do you kind of see, like, the physical therapy support blending into a homeschool day? Like, what, on your end, what kind
I
of things
think
are popping up there?
I think there's a couple different things. So I think that um those really do need specific movement and positioning, depending on like what their needs are. So I think like really honoring the fact of that kids do need movement. Like there's a reason that we have recess and teachers are implementing movement breaks in their days and things like that. And again, realizing the why behind it and how that might play into the way that your specific family works throughout things. And then really just diving into what are those positioning needs. I know we've talked a little bit about like our movers and shakers and getting our wiggles out, but there's also the other side of that. Like how much support does this student need? How can we get them in a really supportive chair that actually fits them? Because in our home, my office chair isn't going to fit my 6-year-old who's in first grade, and how might we be able to very quickly and low cost adapt those types of workstations to really make sure that we're not setting up for, repetitive strain or, some of those postural injuries that we can, have.
Yeah.
And then I also have found this very like interesting community of like medical parents. They're like medical moms, like kids who have maybe higher complex medical needs, and that they are looking into homeschooling a lot, just because there's a lot of needs that might not be met in the the school systems. And I think that, physical therapy, and especially like on a consultative model or a coaching model like this, could be really important to those families. I think there's a lot of things that tie into the success of a child. And it really has to be like a multifaceted approach. And I think like these moms who are feeling very empowered to do homeschooling
Hmm.
from the teaching side of things might just need a little bit of support, on the physical side of things, whether it be the types of equipment, the positioning, the movement, how can we best access what we're trying to do in the home. So that was kind of an interesting like community that I have recently happened upon, and I could see it being like something really beneficial to work in conjunction with, and I feel like I also have a lot to learn from them. So yeah,
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it does make.
Yeah,
get
I like
smart
that.
too. Like
I,
there's
it
so
is, and I
much.
like that. Yeah, I like that you're seeing that that's something that's like a important partnership, like to be able to partner with folks that are looking to do that, and then and might need a little support in certain ways and not other ways, right? They might be able to add, bring some things to the table in their family, but help like support them with processing how they're going to go about doing it in the ways that you know you can provide help with. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. I love it when it makes sense.
Don't we all? I mean, another thing
Yeah.
that just kind of probably makes sense to us is, I think that find a lot of times when I find people who might be interested in my, working with me or my services, it's like, well, I don't have time for one more thing. How am I supposed to
Hmm.
add something to my plate when this is already overwhelming for me?
Yeah,
And I think that's probably a conversation you guys have had too. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah. Even yeah.
had Carrie.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were going to add on. Go ahead. You do. You
I was
go.
just gonna say, like, how do you go about that question or conversation, and are there any like practical ways that you help build into some of the coaching that you do to kind of address that question?
I was going to say, even when parent, well, Jen, I'll pass over to you in a moment, but I was going to say that I think even when parents who are really, like self-aware and ready to plug in and get some support for themselves, and they're, have a good sense of what's going on, but they need some guidance and help navigating what they're trying to do, even though they have the right intention. Even with when we're starting out in a place like that, I think it's like it's very, very difficult for them sometimes to do the follow through. Like we have people who are so in it to win it, and they want to do it, and they're here to do it, and they've taken that first step of getting help from us to do it, and they're still. It's like each, having that, I think, sort of conversation about like how can we make this, so it's something that is continuing to feel doable for you as you go, because sometimes people get that instinct to do and to start and to try, but then like it feels like a lot sometimes. So anyway, Jen, you could talk about how we try to make it, I guess, seem, or help them realize there are ways to do that doesn't have to be like all these extra things.
Yeah, we try to, when we're parents on some of those kind of concrete things or things to experiment with, we're helping them navigate some priorities, like what's really like consistently happening that's like, oh, this is always like so exhausting and takes so much energy and it makes everybody, you know, not feel good and all the things. So we try to help them prioritize that and then try to also then work that into a time of day that might be conducive. So we're helping prioritize. So we're not saying like, yeah, we could all, all parents can think of many, problems and challenges that they want to solve. But let's start with, just one, maybe two, that are really kind of at the top of your kind of angst list, challenge list, and then try to pick a time of day. So for example, like maybe like there's a self-care aspect that's always a challenge for whatever reason, sensory or whatever. Just, child's not interested in it. Say toothbrushing, right? Well, you brush your teeth at, and usually in the morning and at night. Sometimes for parents, the morning, depending on the day of the week or the, morning routine can be really stressful because if their child's getting out the door for daycare or school, then it's just that feeling of there's not enough time and you're rushed and it's more stressful. So we might tease out maybe that might not be the right time to experiment. You might be too stressed. Your brain doesn't have the capacity to kind of attend to those accommodations or strategies you're going to try. Maybe nighttime is a little bit more relaxing. Maybe there's another time like after school or whatever. So trying to help parents find that time where it's a little bit more conducive or a lot more conducive and a little bit more natural to kind of build in. Their brain has more of a capacity to be mindful of using that strategy, and it's a little bit more naturally embedded into the daily routine.
Yeah, I think you probably have similar things too, Paige, which you can talk about in a sec. But I was thinking too, like some of the ways that we work with parents is we're helping them kind of realize it on their own of things that they have tried that worked, and they can do that again, and it doesn't feel like an extra thing being told to them, or they can. There are things like even like the less is more. Sometimes we are telling them, actually, like telling them and reminding them, I should say, that in some cases less is more, that will help get something further along, or so that they actually taking a few things off of their plate and off of their stress list actually help everyone do more or feel better and be able to come with their best self. So it's sort of like there are things like that are a component of the conversations that I think help, which is instead of adding to it, actually maybe try taking off some of these expectations, taking off the demands from even yourself or from your kids in those moments, and not all the time, obviously, for certain things. So I think that's one of the things that comes to mind too when we're talking about like how do we feel like it's not like that they have to do more. It's like, well, number one, finding, as Jen was saying, working it into what naturally works. Number two, kind of having them come up with some of that so it's not being prescribed or told, and they're realizing it. And number three, kind of, I think, what I was saying before of like almost taking stuff off the plate can actually help. What were you going to think?
Yeah, no, that's one of like my favorite conversations to have is I was introduced to this topic by like a doctor at a conference I went to about time toxicity, and like how like doing the thing just to do the thing is like not always the best thing to do. And like he was using the example, I mean, he was speaking to a group of physical therapists about how like physical therapy once a week might not be the best thing for your kid in this very moment. And realizing that as a practitioner of like, maybe what this family needs is to be able to like just enjoy time together and like have those organic moments where they can, actually do the things that we're teaching them. And that is so huge. And like just giving permission to families to say like, have to do it all just because a doctor once said, your kid needs PT, OT, and speech. You don't have to do it all every minute of every day just because, somebody told you to. Like really, what is working and what is the priority and what feels sustainable. And like you said, maybe taking something off of the plate, so that you can really focus on like what's important. I think that's like I could talk forever about that kind of concept. And that's like one of the things that that really started me on like getting my program going and stuff. And I think the other thing that you said that really got me thinking is, giving the parent, the caregiver, the opportunity to really do some reflection on what you were saying about like what feels hard, what feels easy, what feels like too much, and like really helping them to decide, the what, the when, the why, all of that. And that's all like built into the online content of my program right now, which I love. So really like getting people to do some self-reflection, some journaling, some asking some prompting questions so that I'm not the one who has all the answers. Like really the parents have the answers. It's just me helping guide them to where that answer is.
Right.
So,
yeah. We say that all the time.
Same.
When, that we're not, I think that's, we can probably definitely all relate to this, that when people don't understand the coaching process, especially with parent or caregiver coaching, is like, we're not telling you, because sometimes people say, well, they feel like they might be not doing the right things, and so there's that hesitation to maybe seeking out support because they're having those kinds of feelings. But in fact, we're not at all telling you what to do. We come in with the perspective and lens of that parents are the expert of their kids, but we are just helping you navigate some challenges, and we're bringing our OT lens to that. And yeah, some of those leading questions you mentioned, like what's feeling really hard, what's getting, helping them figure out what's going on there. And yeah, we're not telling, so we always say that all the time, we're not telling parents what to do, we're helping them figure it out, because it needs to work for them. It needs to be individualized and personalized.
Or take a different perspective. Sometimes it's like we're urging them to take the perspective of their child from a different, in a different way that they have been, or shift the here and now to the future and back and forth, like the zooming in and out. And so there's a lot of like, I think there's a lot of value in that, and that kind of approach can make it feel like it's not just like a one more thing. It's like when they do come to do the time with a coach, right? You're doing it then and there, and you're doing a lot of the hard work processing it with someone, and then the takeaways are things that are going to be kind of organically able to be applied then, because it's not like a to-do list per se, a shift sometimes. So but that's a really big question, because I do think I think we all, like, I mean, myself as a parent as well, like, even if someone says to try to respond in a different way, to try it differently, it's like that does sometimes feel like another thing, even though it's not another thing, it's a different,
Yeah.
it's like replacing it. It's just sometimes feels like that. So it's super hard to do that.
I think it's just like the fact that you guys are honoring that, and that you're coming from a lens of like, we see you, and we also understand that you as a parent have needs too, and like coming from that side of things, rather than, like you said, you're not the expert on their kid, and you're just coming in to kind of try to get to the answer that's probably already there somewhere, and help them
100%.
towards that. Yeah. No, that's super cool. So I think like that just lends to the fact that like we definitely have a lot of overlap in the way that we like to do things, which
Yeah.
is super cool. But
Yeah.
I think, something that people might be asking, and I know I hear it a lot, I don't know if you guys do, is like, okay, what is OT? What is PT? Like, how do I know what I need? We could answer, but maybe just a little bit about, especially in what we actually do right now, like as coaches, what would you say to somebody, like, what are some things that families might not realize that OT parent coaches do? And how would you explain that to somebody who asked?
I mean, well, I mean, for one, and it might not be exactly relevant to the question at hand, but for one, I think that sometimes parents don't realize right away that we are actually working solely with the parents to help them learn and grow, and in a way that then can support their child learning and growing as well. So I think some people realize that right away, and that's awesome, and they know what they're looking for. And some people don't realize that it's the focus on the parents, and I think that's one thing. But I don't know, Jen, if you were thinking of anything else about.
Yeah, in terms of what there's that, in that a lot of times we find ourselves, I mean, again, I think part of the reason why we shifted into doing coaching was that when we realized the impact of empowering parents. Paige, you see this as well, and I know was part of your shift, in terms of, and you gave a really good example that I know I've experienced too, about how much can you really get done in that session, that PT session once a week, or that OT session once a week when you're working with a kid. It's the real meaty stuff is really helping the parents see the value in that, and then them being able to apply it to various contexts, not just in the home, bedtime, morning routine, but out in the community, or all those other relationships, the school home relationship, however that looks for their family. But yeah, that empowering piece is really keeps us is really at the forefront of why we got into that, because we see the value in that, and that's the message we keep giving to parents, or to people who ask us about what we do, is that it's really about the parents feeling confident in their ability to carry out what they know and what they have experimented with, and then found is the most effective approach, strategy, tools for their family. It aligns with their values. It aligns with what they know works. It helps them kind of tune out the chatter. We all hear that, have heard that in our heads, in terms of other people saying, oh, this worked for my kid, try this, or oh, if my kid did that, I would never let them get away with that. We hear that from generations. We hear that from peers, our own peers. We hear that at the park, in the grocery store. We see the looks people are giving, right? We see that everywhere. And so we want parents, and that comes from when you're second guessing yourself in any situation, like, it's because you're not confident in what you're doing. But when you can tell yourself in your head and out loud, I know this works, and I know that this moment in time, what I'm doing, even if it's not playing out in the ideal way in this moment, it is building to a place that is going to work. And we're helping parents see that we're in this for the long game, and that even when there's missteps, even when the child or the parent or both don't show up in the way they hoped, that is an opportunity to build and grow, and that in the long game, what you're doing, have confidence in what you're doing, you're heading in the right direction for yourself and for your child.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know about you, Paige, because I think, well, we didn't just speak about anything specific, actually, even to OT.
Right.
But I was going to say, what's your thought about the PT piece? Because then I was going to say, because we might be able to then talk about the similarities and differences from what you were thinking.
A huge overlap. Like, I resonate 100% with what Jen just said about, all of it, really. I think me, like, if somebody said, like, okay, what's the PT side of it mean to you? I think it just has to do with, like, the lens that I look at things. Being that, like, most of my experience and education is from the PT side of things. So things like and transfers and gait, and I'm being very general right now because there's a lot that goes into it. But I think one thing that people might not know that I really like to focus on is, the caregiver and their wellness, both, emotionally and physically, and preventing burnout in both sides of things. And how I do that changes from person to person, as we've talked about a lot. But, I think that's one of the things that is why I am a caregiver coach. I'm coaching the caregiver. It's not about the PT for the kid. There's some consultation on that, but it's really so that, like you have said, and what we resonate with highly is, confident, empowered, informed parents and caregivers, and helping them to move forward like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you framed it that way, in the sense of, like, okay, your PT lens, and then obviously the primary focus is on supporting the caregiver. And similar for us, like, we are supporting the caregiver, but in a different way, right? With different things, or with a different, because each kind of profile of client or family, like, is gonna match up with what our lens is more, right? Because they might be, like, for us, folks are coming to us a lot when children and potentially the adults are having difficulty with self-regulation, emotional regulation, sensory processing profiles, and understanding how to support those and be able to accommodate different styles, daily routines, and daily functional activities that are tricky to get done, as we were saying, tricky to engage in or engage with or participate in. So those are kind of our, like, more common, pain points or areas of focus. And I think we are similar in this potentially, but I think a big aspect of the OT framework and lens has to do with looking at it from several different angles, like looking at the person and, well, multiple people in the situation, but the person who's having difficulty participating. So something where it's like you're looking at the child, in our case, sometimes trying to understand the child's profile, their strengths and weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their interests, all those, and try to think about we call it occupational profile. And then also how that blends is kind of, it's like a Venn diagram, and how that the personal factors blend with the environmental factors and the activity or occupation factors. So obviously it's going to apply to both of ours, but for different reasons of what they're maybe working on trying to do. So that a big piece of our lens is thinking about how to get people to think about all those components, not just focus on, like, fixing a problem, changing something only about the child, but how the parent can respond, how you can adjust the environment, how we can think about what the activity and the expectations are. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, thinking about how we come at it from an OT lens. And again, I think it feels unique to us, but I know that people are, especially someone like you who's applying your knowledge to help caregivers, that's going to naturally be a component of, it's going to naturally be a lens that you're wearing. There's, I imagine,
a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of parts of it that are special to each of our lenses. And I think one of the coolest things that I've had through conversations, but I know especially with you guys, is, the conversation of like, we're the first ones to say if maybe our specific lens and the way we go about things or our background is not that somebody is looking for, or that they might need in that moment. So it's really cool. I love like having this conversation about really what we're looking for is the same end point, but maybe there's is and what the needs are to get to that end point. And I love that I have you guys in my back pocket so that if someone comes to me and I'm like, nope, Carrie and Jen would do this so much better than me. That's one of the like most wonderful things I love about networking and, just being in this community. So
same. Because I mean, I think we can each think of examples of like how someone might come to us with one thing, but then have another set of needs or something where you're like, this definitely lends itself more to this, or in addition to this, which I think is the awesome part is like we have now a partnership and complement each other with that, those resources. So, but I think you're right. The takeaway piece of it that we both like, it's being helping people participate, helping people, families access, helping them feel more confident in their navigating their like in their journey of like life as a family with their children and themselves. So like kind of helping them get there, even if their specific challenges are different in different domains or whatever. That's the bottom line, and I love that.
I think that kind of like you kind of just answered a question, like jumping ahead a little bit to like a little bit of our like our closing, like our why behind why we're doing what we do and our why behind like having this conversation today. And I think you just definitely answered it, but I don't know if you have anything else to add on like, what is something that you hope that a family or someone listening would take away from this today? What would be, if there was like one thing you could leave with them? The answer it.
Jen? No, I'm looking to Jen. I think we're both looking to see who might respond. But Jen, you can, if you want. I just spoke for a few minutes. Do you want to try to take a long view and do a takeaway?
Yeah, sure. We did say so many things, but I think, I hope parents remember that this whole process of parenting and your child growing and learning is not perfect. It's not meant to be perfect. Which explains why, as part of the explanation of why it's so hard to trust your gut or to feel confident in all the things. And that, that is what we love helping parents do, is empowering them to feel more confident. And so just remind yourself that it is not perfect, and that it is true that we learn from those missteps, and that they lead to solutions and a better way that works for your family and your child.
Those sort of like ebbs and flows and zigs and zags is all part of the norm, and to really embrace that and figure that we can move forward through it. And I think my take on that is very similar, and that like progress doesn't happen in like these like big, huge, monumental things. It happens through like small changes and small sustainable changes, and really creating routines that support that. And that you really have to, I'd rather have somebody say, I'm implementing that 1-2 minute thing every day than I did 30 minutes of physical therapy once this week.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my takeaway.
Absolutely.
And then I also just want to like make a note that like, I just think it's lovely, and I hope people are the love and the support that there's people out there like us who are, this is what our, our passion and, our job, but our passion is to help people, and that like, will feel super alone in this process, and that there's people out there that can help them. And if I'm not the right person, I know all these wonderful people who can also help you, and I'll put you in the right direction. So that also kind of goes to, just if you could give people a little bit of overview, if they're interested in learning more or working with you, where should we point them to?
Excuse me, sorry. At a tickle cough. Yeah, I mean, any of our social media accounts. So we're on Instagram and Facebook, the OT Parent Coaches. We have our website, the otparentcoaches.com. So that can be, great starting point to learn a little bit more and to see it visually and process it a
Great
little
tips
differently
and tricks
than
on
this
there too.
format. Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay, thanks. And yeah, we like to keep posting about those things to kind of get people thinking about it and have little takeaways. And yeah, and then you can book a free discovery call through our website or just by reaching out and asking to speak with us, and that can initiate the process that we would go through to get in touch and to connect. And then I assume similar for you, because I know you're on Instagram, and
all of the same
your
kind
website
of applies for me. Instagram is a really great place if you're like, I don't know, check it out, see some little tips or tricks or follow along with the journey. That's a really great place. My website, there's a couple of free resources if you're at that phase where, maybe some bite-sized information would be welcome for you. You can join there. And I also do offer a free discovery call, which is a great option just to kind of talk about, what is going on and how I might best support you. And if I'm not the one, then, sending you in the right direction. So yeah, I think that very similar to what you guys were saying.
Yeah. I know.
Go ahead.
I'm glad you reached out I'm glad you reached out when you found us, as you did, and to make this connection, because it's been great. It's been really nice to be able to, as you said, to be able to build our network and support for everyone and have resources available for various families. And to learn from each other too, because we're all learning as we go. We're all learning as we go, and we're trying to figure out how to best support people with what they're looking for, and find ways that are being useful with other people. We can use those as well. We want to leverage all that, but we're always excited to connect with folks like you or other parents, just to kind of see what's going on and just start a connection.
Absolutely. And
we love doing that.
We just have to keep that conversation going, so that we're just connecting with more people, and that we connect with parents and caregivers, that everyone feels confident and empowered, and and all of that is really what we're trying to do. So I hope this was a helpful conversation to whoever might be listening, and I always enjoy talking to you, Carrie and Jen, but until next time.
So,
yeah, and there will be. Thanks, Paige, so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paige.
It was fun.
Bye-bye.